back to the Leaving the Shallows podcast with myself, Heather Bradley, and my really good friend, Jackie Skanderup. We are super excited today to bring on a guest named Nicole Fitzpatrick. She runs an organization called The Village Global, and it is about rescuing children from human trafficking, and I'm going to let her tell this whole story about that. But I just want to welcome you today, Nicole, and I just want to say that I'm so honored to have you on here because I had the privilege this summer of going on a mission trip with my church with an organization called Mountain Gateway, and you guys are an arm of that. I think you guys partner together, and
Yes,
I knew we were going to into the deep heart of Mexico, which is where you are right now. And I knew we were going to minister into these villages and stuff, but I didn't know we were going to the Village Global till later. And so when I found out we were going to the Village Global, I got very emotional and I started crying a little bit because I felt like the Lord was telling me he was taking me somewhere that he wanted me to see. And the reason being is years ago, I guess I was just very intrigued about human trafficking, and I would pray a lot about it. And I didn't know, which is probably what most people feel like, what do you even do? How do you help? And what organizations are out there? And so I knew there was some connection there on why God was allowing me to go. But I am not going to lie. I felt very timid and fearful when we found out we were going because I didn't know what I was going to see. And I was worried about how I was going to feel and how my heart was going to feel. And was I going, I know it sounds crazy, but like, was I going to be able to handle this? I felt very emotional. And I just want to point out two things before you get started. But with my experience of going to the Village Global was, when I got there, I was very overwhelmed with the presence of God. And I don't know why I was surprised, because here's the thing. God is in this. And what I felt there, I felt his presence so heavy and the peace of him. And I could see his healing hand on these children. And I was blown away by it. And what happened in my heart when I was there, it made me feel so humbled because I felt like the Lord was telling me that it was an honor that I got to go see the least of these. Like he was letting me peek into his heart. And I've not forgotten that feeling. It blew my mind. It just blew my mind to see God in a space like that. And so that's what I took away from that. But also another thing that I loved seeing while I was at the Village Global was that it's not an organization. And I know it is. So hear me out with what I'm going to say here. It's a family. And what I saw there was a family. Even though you have a million kids, it's a family and it's run like a home. And they call you Mama Nicole. And that was just amazing. I loved that so much. And so, Nicole, thank you so much for joining us today. We just want to hear about you and your husband and what God has done through y'all, what you're doing, how you got to this place, and just share some stories and tell us a little bit about that wall behind you as well.
Okay. Well, it's a huge honor and privilege to be on this podcast with you guys. Thank you for going above and beyond to look to help the least of these, because that's what they are. It's the least of these. They're called the voiceless children, the forgotten children. But and it was great having you, Heather. You did great. I don't remember any bad incidents. I probably am. I'm not the best host because I've got so many
It was
kids
awesome.
and stuff. But we do our best to take care of our guests. So I'll try to keep our testimonies really long, but I'm gonna try to keep it brief. I actually have a book being printed. My book is finally almost finished being written right now. So I'm hoping by November-ish
That's awesome.
Have it published and maybe can share it on your podcast. But we had quite a life.
Absolutely.
I'm originally from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And when I was 12 years old, my parents heard of a missionary, David Hogan, founder of Freedom Ministries, preach. Their heart was poured to the mission field. We went to a year of language school. And when I was 13, went to Guatemala permanently to live there. When I was 14, we went and did a long few months visit between there. But all that to say, I'm an MK. So I was a missionary kid. And when I was mid-teen, I met Jason, who's a few years older than me. He's originally from St. Louis, Missouri, had gone to Bolivia, for a while, and then got stationed in Guatemala for a little while. There we met. It wasn't love at first sight. He was actually seriously dating someone from St. Louis at the time, but as the years went on, it didn't work out, and for them. And she's still serving God and actually on the mission field somewhere else now. But it's just a really funny story. But God has been faithful. He put us together. We got married a few years later in Tamaulipas, Mexico. And I'm sorry, San Luis Potosi. And our whole goal when we were married, was pioneer missionaries. That's what we had been trained to do. My parents were pioneer missionaries in the jungles of Guatemala, the mountains of Mexico, and then the jungles and mountains in city of Peru. So I'd already lived in a few different countries, was fluent in Spanish. And, I married the love of my life. And we have, I still have some of my old journals and diaries from when I was in high school and getting a degree in Spanish, that kind of stuff. And I just wanted to pioneer. I wanted to reach the unreached with my husband, be his helpmeet. And so that's really what we dedicated ourselves to do the first years of our marriage. This won't take a long time, but I got in a really bad wreck a year after our marriage, a year and a week after we got married, a week after our first anniversary. I was in a tragic accident, was thrown close to 100 feet from a windshield, and my body was all smashed to pieces. I was in the hospital for over 3 months, and or right at 3 months actually. And I had amnesia, and it's going to be that'll be in the book because people begged me for years to write about it, and I'm finally writing about it. So,
Awesome.
we went through a year or two we came right back to the mission field. Got in the wreck in December. We were back on the mission field by May of '94. Got in the wreck in December of '93. So that was a big hold up. In amnesia, I didn't know who my family was, my parents, much less my siblings or my husband. And so when he walked in, it was weeks after I got out, when I finally woke up from the coma, and they said, "This is your husband." And I thought he was a nurse or the pizza delivery guy because he was always bringing pizza for everybody to eat. I was in ICU for 6 weeks, and fourth floor 4 weeks, and a month or two in the other one. So anyway, we had a really tragic beginning. We had a beautiful honeymoon of 1 year. Perfection. Jason says we had a really beautiful marriage for a year, and I don't remember it, unfortunately. I don't remember any of it. So that's all going to be in the book. So I got in the wreck, got out of it, had to go through rehab a while, and then we came back to Mexico in '94, and that was right in the middle of the Zapatista War. Mexico's at war. The same where I got in a wreck is whenever they invaded Chiapas. It's just a whole crazy story, but that's all going to be in the book. But so we, in 1994, we moved back to where we were working. Jason had, before we got married, been given an area called Xochitipan Hidalgo. It's a Nahuatl village right at the border of the Hidalgo. We were on the Hidalgo side of Veracruz. So we lived there 10, 11 years. And then in April of 2003, we had miraculously had a son a few years after we got married, and a daughter 5, 6 years later. So we have 2 children, a son, Said Justice, who's fixing to be 28, my daughter, Jasmine, just turned 22. So they were born and bred here in Mexico, and doing great. They're doing great. My son served in the U.S. Marine Corps for a few years, studied college. She got a degree in cosmetology in the States, and they're both back here, living and working hard here. And my daughter's married and has a beautiful little baby boy. So that's where we are now. But we came here in April of 2001. Our leader at the time told us he picked, I think it was 5 or 6 of the men from Freedom Ministries to go send out pioneer. That the Holy Spirit told them that it was time. We've been there in our sections for over 10 years. We had national leadership raised up. We had national pastors, national missionaries. So, Paul was never in the same place, or Peter, more than 3 years. So let's go on and broaden our territory, get more people saved, pioneer more churches. So that's what we were sent out to do. And we actually moved here. We prayed and fasted for 21 days, the whole ministry. And then we found a house. Jason chose Puebla. I don't know how many hundreds of miles south of where we were at the time. So Jason chose, after much prayer and fasting, he scouted, and we chose Puebla, the state of Puebla. We're actually right at the border of Tlaxcala and Veracruz, also in Mexico State. So we're at the border in Hidalgo again. So we're in the middle of several states also. But we're in the state of Puebla. So we came in June of 2003. We came to live in Tenango de las Flores, Puebla. And again, it was the same thing that we'd always done. My whole life as a missionary was pioneer churching, reaching the unreached. And he chose Tenango because that's where the dirt road, that the pavement it was kind of pavement, but that's where the more or less paved road ended. And from there on, it was just at the time just all paths and dirt roads and trails. And we just went on motorcycles. Jason, he's the one that pioneers all the churches. We go on the rough roads. He scouts out first. We always have maps everywhere, and he puts, the stars. If it's green, never been evangelized, he puts a green star. If it was evangelized but been abandoned, he puts another color. If it has a good established church, we don't go in to disrupt churches. We put a gold star and don't go back there. So Jason did that, and he scouted, and we began planting churches here. He began planting churches. He put a motorcycle in the back of his truck, go as far as the truck can go, park the truck there, get on his motorcycle, go on the trails as far as his motorcycle can go, chain the motorcycle up to a tree, get off and hike as many hours as it took to reach the unreached. And that's something a lot of people don't understand. And in America, this is our neighboring country. Mexico's just south of Texas, in California. So like unreached. And this was over 30 years ago when we got married. But there's still unreached villages, believe it or not. There still are many, many tribes that are still unreached. So that's what we did. But that was in June of 2003. In that same fall, I began seeing something different, even though it was also Nahuatl, a different tribe of Nahuatl, but same Indian people that we were working with to reach and evangelize here, and a lot of Totonaco here. So we work primarily now with the Totonaco and Tepehuac. Jason's worked with like 13 tribes since he's been here. But so we started noticing we had a beautiful house right by the lake. It's old Indian towns all around us, but we lived in Tenango, which has a beautiful lake, and we got a beautiful 2-bedroom house for $200 a month. So it's like we were really, really blessed, and that's where all the trails started. So we were just happy. I was just a happy homeschooling mom. He established churches. Once it was a safe place for us to go because my daughter had just turned 2. My son was like 7 or 8. So then we would go with them, and I've always had a heart for children. Everywhere we go in Peru, Guatemala, I always had a children's ministry to the children. So it was always where my heart was. So as he established the churches and then bring us, I'd have children's church and campaigns and stuff like that. But there was just something different because even though we lived in a town where, houses, it wasn't huts and everyone had electricity and running water, there were just so many children on the streets. And if you go to our website, thevillageglobal.org, it'll give you just our page or so of our biography. But I share in there how, because a lot of people are like, how do you get into human trafficking? Because I've been doing this since pretty much 2004. And I had never heard the word human trafficking or child sex trafficking, or I didn't know child pornography existed. Even though I've been on the mission field and seen a lot of stuff, I was a very novice at all of this. You've all heard of that person who was molested as a child or who got kidnapped and raped, and that's 1 in 100 billion to me at the time. I didn't know how common it was, but how did I get into? So that's our past. We're pioneer missionaries, and this is how we got into where we are now. And just a side note, we still pioneer churches. We have 15 national missionaries raised up that Jason's risen up since we got here. And we still have house churches. We have 65 or so house churches in 8 different states in South and South Central Mexico, from Puebla to Chiapas and in Oaxaca. And so we still have the churches. We also have a drug rehab. And but my main vision is the children. So how did it start? In 2004, we were living by a beautiful lake, homeschooling the children, going to the churches once it was safe for us to go with my husband. But children would come to my door, sometimes in the morning, sometimes in the afternoon. Pretty little children, sometimes 3 or 4 with their 7 or 8-year-old sibling. Sometimes just a few 10-year-old boys, but they knock on the door. And what's funny is they weren't like begging for food or money. They would ask me for a job. They'd be like, can I cut your grass? I'm like, we just mowed it, we just cut it. Actually, we cut it with machetes too. We just chopped it. Like, well, can we wash your car? They were looking for work. Can we water your plants? Can we take your dogs for a walk? And I'm like, why do you want a job? How much would you charge me? They said, just food, just a few pieces of bread or 10 pesos so we could get bread for my brother and sister. I'm like, you haven't eaten? They're like, no. not today. Did you eat yesterday? No. So I could go on and on. I was, like I said, novice at it all. And I realized all I wanted to do was eat. So I would say, okay, y'all can wash the car. Y'all can cut my grass. And there's a little bit of kids with machetes hanging off their waist, And I said, okay, y'all can cut my grass, or can do whatever, And I would go in and make a chicken soup, make some spaghetti, make some bean tacos, whatever I had on hand, and I'd feed them and invite them in. They were very timid, impoverished children. They would eat, or sometimes they wouldn't refuse to come in. They just take the food and run and say thank you. But it started, once you give a few kids a job, then it wasn't just 2 or 3, it'd be a dozen kids coming asking me for a job a day sometimes. And so then I'm like, it's 10:30 in the morning. Why aren't y'all in school? And they look at each other and they, my mom just had a baby, so she couldn't bring her lunch to school. Or my grandma's sick and my parents went to take care of her. Or my brother is in the hospital in Mexico City. Just now I realize it was lie after lie. They didn't know how to tell me I'm orphaned. I live on the streets. I'm drafted. I'm abandoned. My mom's from a different state, and she left me by the lake 3 years ago. They didn't know how to tell me that. They were scared. I didn't have their trust yet. So I believed. I'm like, what, really? And so, long story short, over the next 8 months or so, that I started giving kids jobs and teaching them how to read and write. It got to where I got permission from our ministry leader at the time and the mayor of the town we lived in. I said, there's all these kids that don't go to school. He goes, yeah, they're abandoned, or their parents are separated, or their parents are drug addicts, or they're orphaned, and there's no one to take care of them. I'm like, isn't there a children's home? Isn't there something isn't there a refuge for them? And he's like, no, we can't afford that. So I said, can I take them to my home and start at least teach them classes and to read and write and the basics? So I opened up a school in 2005. Opened up a school, and I'd have anywhere from a dozen kids to 40 kids a day showing up for classes. Doing that while I was still homeschooling my own kids and raising up churches with my husband.
Wow.
So I did that. I did that 8 months or so, and it wasn't until 2 sisters, of all the many kids I had, 2 of them were sisters. A lot of them were siblings. But 2 of the girls, and I'm not going to share any names publicly, but at the time they were 11 and 13. I had actually met them when I was like 8 and 11. So I'd known these kids since I moved to that little area, and it's a village area. So, there were the girls always carrying the water, always carrying wood for people, selling it for, $1 a load. Always not clean. I would take them in and bathe them in my house, buy them new clothes. Well, so I'd known these girls for a couple of years, and they were always at classes. They'd stay the night with me many nights. They lived in a little shack. From our house, you could walk there in 10 minutes, and it was in more of an impoverished area, so we'd go. And I'd seen where they rented their dad and stepmom, indigenous people, couldn't speak much Spanish, rented a hut about 10 by 12 feet max. That was the hut they all lived in. So sometimes they stayed with us, some with them, but most of the time with their dad. And I knew that their mom had left when they were 2 and 5. Their dad was an alcoholic, always just on the ground, he's still an alcoholic. I still drive past him sometimes. So I knew they were in abject poverty. I knew they'd never been to school. So I took them in, was doing school with all the other kids. But one day I noticed that they were one week, I noticed every day they weren't doing their homework. They weren't eating. I was going to the bathroom a lot. And I saw they were nauseous. I could tell they were throwing up. They were pale. Never in a million years did I ever suspect pregnancy. I'd worked with indigenous people most of my life. Just the ones I had worked with were very protective over their children, very old school.
Yeah.
So never my dream, the worst dreams, nightmare, that I thought that they would possibly be pregnant. I thought, because we'd done a lot in all the countries I've lived in, parasites, amoebas, roundworms. So I was, they didn't have any vaccines. That's one of the signs of human trafficking, is when a child has never been to doctor, never been vaccinated. They didn't have they didn't even have birth certificates. I had just gotten their birth certificates myself. I gone to court and got their birth certificates.
Wow.
We had to make up dates and stuff, but I take the kids to doctors, and by their teeth formation and bone formation is how we guess their ages. So long story short, I thought, they have parasites. They probably have roundworms, so they can't eat. So that afternoon, I took them to the doctor, and the doctor immediately said, what's your full name? They didn't know their full names. I had to say it. When was your birthdays? I had to say it. When was the first day of your last menstrual cycle? And they looked at each other and looked at me. They're like, I don't know what that is. So we have to, it took a long time to explain what was going on. And one of them had blood once, the other had never had a menstrual cycle. And he goes, I said, can you just deparasite them? Can we give them their first vaccinations and deparasite them, deworm them? And he's like, no, because they're pregnant and that'll harm the baby. I said, there's no way they're pregnant.
Wow.
Yeah, they're pregnant. He said, I'm a doctor. I can tell. I said, but you can't tell if they're pregnant by looking at it. He goes, yeah, they have all the symptoms. I'm like, I was kind of upset. I said, just deworm them. I was such a novice. And so I was actually frustrated. My husband had driven us over there. He was in the truck. And I told him, I said, they said they're pregnant. He's like, there's no way. So we got them home. And I was livid. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to prove they're not pregnant. So I took them to the laboratory, the labs. I took them to a friend that owned a lab. We took and had their blood tested, and lo and behold, we went home. I was feeding them, and I'm pretty sure I got a phone call because this was before we had cell phones. It's a long time ago. A phone call, and the lab guy said, "No, actually, Jason went for the labs for me and brought them back." And he's like, "They're both pregnant." I said, "What?" And sure enough, positive on both of them. So went upstairs and got my medical book out and showed them. They had no idea. I said, "Do you realize you're pregnant?" They're like, "How can we be pregnant?" I said, "Have you ever had intercourse? And have you had sex with a man?" Like, what is that? And, I had to go get my book, show them what ovaries are, male organs, female organs, and said, "Has this ever happened?" And they're like, "Oh, yeah, that happens every night." Ooh. My brother first, and then my cousins, and then whoever wants to do that to us, all the drunkards pretty much of the town, whose wives won't give it to them. They'll bring them in the hut, and I'll take care of each one by one. We'll take care of them. And they pay my brother 50 pesos. 50 pesos back then was about $5. So that's right now it's even less, like $3. So for just a few dollars a man, but they bring in 10 or 15 men per sister. So they were getting a couple of days' wage just by renting their sisters. So that's when my world fell apart, but my eyes were open. We had just gotten internet. We'd lived all our lives, no internet or Wi-Fi. We'd just gotten internet. I started reading documentations and reading. That's where I learned the word human traffic, child sex trafficking. I didn't know any of that existed. I did not know. But, the root of human trafficking is poverty and corruption. And they were right in the middle of all of it. And it's survival. It's also something that is passed down. It's something that, I'll get back to that later in a minute. But yeah, that's when my world just fell to pieces. I rushed to the presidency of the courthouse. I told the officers, I said, "You're not going to believe this. This is what's happening. This guy, it's just their other brother, he's 16, and their dad, and they just looked at me and go, yeah, it happens all the time. It happens in millions of houses. What am I going to do about it? They have to come and press charges, but we have nowhere to put them." I'm like, what? And that's when I realized they didn't have birth certificates, they didn't have vaccination. That's what's called. I have a good friend of mine, Kathy Strado. She runs a ministry that works. We're affiliated with them too. It's the unseen, but that's why it's called the unseen. The children. There's so many. I believe it's 1 in 4 children today do not exist. What does that mean? They don't exist. They were born in shacks, huts, hotels, what have you. They were born, and there's no registration. There's no birth certificate. So those are the John Does that you find thrown off of cliffs after years of trafficking. And unfortunately, I've been sent many, many times pictures of little girls and little boys nude, thrown off of cliffs, and the district attorneys are like, "Do you know this one? Can you name this one?" Because there's no name, because they've never been to school, they have no vaccinations, no registration. They're just born for trafficking. They're born to brothel. So that's when my eyes opened up to that, and I said, well, we got to do something. And it was crazy how God just gave me favor with the government. I got good attorneys. I got our leader at the time who had trained us totally gave me the thumbs up for it. Britt and Audrey, who are the founders and presidents of Mountain Gateway, we worked together, since I was a teen. We were all trained together, and I'm so grateful that Jason and I work under Mountain Gateway again. With them, we're blessed, because we had all broke off from the ministry at different times to work under other people, but we are so blessed that we're with Mountain Gateway, because we were trained under the same ministry. We understand each other. We share the same vision of reaching the unreached, reaching the world, but also fulfilling James 1:27, which says, I'm struggling thinking of English because I'm usually talking Spanish, but
That's
a
okay.
pure and undefiled. I'm trying to think in English how it is, but pure and
Yeah.
undefiled religion is caring for the orphans and the widows,
Yeah.
and that verse just jumped out the page to me whenever I started taking these children in, getting permission. We had to open up civil associations and get permission, and but a lot of people say, how did you end up going to the brothels and finding out all these kids? But because you don't need cell phones when you work with the poor. They get the word out so fast. So once I started taking these kids in, pressing charges against pedophiles, pressing charges against perpetrators, and I had the first judges that I went to court with, because court cases are long processes. It takes a long time to arrest them. Then for sentencing can take anywhere from 1 to 3 to 4 years before they're actually sentenced.
Wow.
So I have to go to court and with the minors, testify against them. And I've had more than one judge who were like 80 years old follow me, and it's against the rules to leave the courthouse with your robe, but they freak out when I get on the stand and testify against them. And I'll just look at those narcos or family, whoever it is. I think I already said it, but 88% of children who are trafficked are trafficked from people who should be caring for them at home. Those are facts that you don't see a lot on TV. And I had to see that for myself because, we've all seen the movie Trade and Taken, and we think that's what it is. She's a beautiful girl from the United States or from Europe, whatever, and she's kidnapped, and her family is selling their yachts and their homes to find her, and they get the best detectives to look for her. I'm not mocking that. There are a percentage of children that does happen to, about 8 or 10% of it nowadays, but normally that's not what it is. It's their own family. A lot of my kids are orphaned completely. All of my kids are at least orphaned by one, most of them. Some of them still have 2 living, but most of the time it's, again, abject poverty and corruption are the root of human trafficking. It's not like these people just were born evil people, but it's a generational curse. Their moms were raped by their parents or their uncles, yada yada. So it's normal for them. These kids saw their dads do it. It is a generational curse, but it's also abject poverty and corruption. There's no one paying more than $5 or $6 a day right now. $5 or $6 a day, and you know what we're paying right now in gasoline in Mexico? Just filled up the day for yesterday. Oh my God, it went up 25 pesos a liter. We are paying $6.66.
Wow.
666. That's what I told you. I said 666.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
But right now, it was when I did that calculation, it was 24.99 a liter. It's 4 liters to a gallon, and the peso that day was 15 pesos to $1. So I said, this is so ironic and so wicked. And so how can you expect people to survive when we're paying $4 a gallon for milk? Meat is outrageous. We can't hardly afford that. We buy it 2 or 3 times a week max for each children's home. Gasoline, $6.66 a gallon. I could go on and on. Everything's expensive. It was expensive like that 20 years ago when I started. So, and yet you'll have these women most women have the hormones of caring for their children. Most women, God put it in us to be helpmeets and nurturers and love our children. But when a woman is, as a child, violated, betrayed, harmed, sold for life or sold every night by different men, it becomes habitual and normal. And when they have that child, and they always, I've seen this so many times, they fall in love with a man, they believe he's going to take care of them, have a couple of children, and sometimes it's a good marriage, but then he dies or gets killed or gets sick or gets electrocuted on the job, or a snake bites him while he's in the field. So then that mother who waited all her life to have a happy family has for 1, 2, up to 5 or 6 kids, and her husband's dead. Well, they don't have life insurance. There's no benefits coming from the job he worked at. You're forgotten. So she can work in the field for $5 or $6 a day, and that's a luck if she gets that much right now. And oil is a couple of dollars a liter, for cooking. I mean, food is outrageous. A lot of people think, oh, it's a third world country, everything's cheap. No, everything's more expensive. Now, given we grow our own beans and stuff like that. If you grow your own beans and rice and corn, and own your own land, but everyone pays rent. it's a hard situation. So that widow, or sometimes they're not widowed. Sometimes their husband, a woman has a few kids, and this is very graphic and it's sad, but it's universal, it's globally. Once they have, if a man is not entregado, surrendered his life to Christ Jesus, marriage is hard. Marriage takes work, and then you have 4 or 5 kids, and you're barely making it, and we put weight on once we have kids sometimes, and we're just not that same beautiful little virgin girl you marry. So the man's looking for something else. And right now it's so much pornography, so much, everywhere you go, the billboards, it's just this gorgeous woman with the perfect abs.
Yeah.
And then there's women everywhere tempting the men. So a lot of times it's very, very typical, not just in Mexico, and in my own United States of America.
Yeah.
A woman is left behind. She's abandoned by her husband when she has a couple of kids. He wants young and healthy, and and anyway, I could go on and on about that. It gets me upset. But so these women are abandoned, left behind, or widowed, earning a few dollars a day, and then the men are out there. They're narcos. Someone was just sex trafficking engineers. And they're they look for women at the bus stop, at the grocery store, working, selling fruit, working the fields. And they start romancing, and they see how many kids she has. And they romance her, get her a house, pay her rent, pay her bus fares every day. Start falling in love. It's called grooming. And they groom that woman. And then they get her hooked on drugs, meth, cocaine, what have you. And then she's addicted. And then they start bringing men into her room at night. By the time her conscience is seared, and he's taken that 4-year-old girl, that 2-year-old girl, that 8-year-old boy, it's her conscience is seared, and it's not like she's always willingly to do it, but she's addicted to drugs by then. She's in pain, she's hurting, but he's like, you let me have your kids, and you're going to have free room and board, and I'll take care of you. Sometimes he ends up killing that person and just takes the kids. I'm going in a lot of directions because it's not, you can't box in what I do. You can't box in a perpetrator. You can't box in a pedophile. They all do different things, but the heart is still the same evil, self-centered, narcissistic, wicked hearts. So that's where we got where we are. My little 4-bedroom house by the lake. I got up to 20-something people living there. And then we bought this land about 10 miles south, right in the middle where we have all our house churches. And it's 2.7 hectares, it's a little over 6 acres. And we built. And what I was saying earlier is we don't need cell phones to get the word out. Every time we started pressing charges against people and having people arrested and taking care of these children, not just like Heather, like you said, we've had a lot of people from a lot of different countries come, a lot of people from Mexico visit us, and that's what they all get when they're with us. It's like, I came thinking it was an institution, and legally we are an association, a big institution, but it's not an institution. These kids call you mama, and a lot of people say, how do you get them to say mama? I've never asked anybody to say mama to me. I introduce myself as Miss Nicole or Sister Nicole. And the girls who I first rescued, and they bore their children, their kids when they were babies, I was putting them through school and getting them jobs and stuff. They'd leave and they'd say, Carlos was one of them, and that gets out. It's leaving the kids with me. One had a girl, one had a boy first. And they say, stay with Mama Nicole. And I said, don't call me Mama, you're Mama. I don't want to take that from you. And they're like, Mama, you're the only Mama we've ever known. Our other Mama being. Sorry, he said, here in Latin America, we call our moms, our kids call our moms their mom. Mother is a title we all carry when we're a family. And she said, and you're the only mom I've ever had. So you're their grandmother, but they're going to grow up calling you Mama. So I'm like, okay. So it just kind of happened from there, and all the other kids started noticing that my grandkids, I had grandkids at 33 years old, that my grandkids started calling me Mama, or like 30, I guess. And all the other kids would just one by one say, can we call you Mama also? I said, yeah. Can we call you Mama? So it happened the first couple of years that we started here being called Mama, and I never have to call anybody. Tell anybody to call me. They get here and I introduce myself, or I go up, and they hear all the other kids, Mama, and sometimes it's immediately come getting here. They're like, you're not really all their mom. I said, no, but they call me Mom. They're like, can I call you Mom? And I'm like, it's my pleasure, but it's never a forced thing. So
Right.
yeah, um, that's why we started here. So we have raised over 2,000 children in the past since
Wow.
2004.
A lot.
2,000 children is
Wow.
well over 2,000 children now, and that's here in where we are right now in Puebla. But I'll briefly tell you that a year and a half ago, in February of 2022, I got a call from a godson who was a representative for a big ministry who protects against church persecutions. And I got called to Chiapas, which is right there at the border of Guatemala. I never dreamed I'd ever live there. And it's a beautiful place. We call it the Little Paris because when you go to San Cristobal de las Casas, it's lights everywhere. Tourists from all over the world. You hear
Oh, wow.
French. Yeah, you hear Japanese. You hear everything. I call it Little Paris or mini New York. It's lights everywhere. People from all over the world. But yet it's an indigenous. It's all indigenous people there selling their
Yeah.
stuff. It's a touristic area, but it's also with all the immigration, with the drug wars we have right now. 6 drug bans there: Jalisco, Sinaloa, one from Russia. It's bad. It's 6 big drug lords that are producing and doing drugs there, dealing
Yeah.
drugs there,
That's
and
scary.
selling. And it's the Guatemala border, so you have a lot of immigrants. You have a lot of people not coming for drugs, not coming to steal. They're trying to come through Mexico, from Panama, from Nicaragua, Honduras, Haiti, Brazil, Argentina, Chile. We've already rescued children from 8 or 9 countries just in the year and a half that I've been there. But they
Wow.
get in the pockets of, some of them are actually kidnapped from their countries, false IDs given to them, and they're crossed over into Mexico as one of the drug lords' children, which they really aren't. Or some of them come in with their family who are simply trying to get a job, make it to America, make it to Mexico. Latin America's upside down with the politics, with the poverty, with everything. So they're trying to get to the States or to Canada. All of them aren't just going to the States. Canada's got a lot they're offering to immigrants. But it's a long process. They're illegal, so they can't just like get on a jet and fly to Canada or
Yeah.
America. But in that process, when the drug lords, the brothel owners, and the child porn producers see those pretty little girls with that beautiful couple, they kill the couple and take those children. A lot of kidnappings going on for those children. So we are doing a lot of. I'm very, very happy to say that Chiapas child protection and integral family relations is excellent. They are really, really putting their money where their mouth is, and there isn't much money. This is Mexico. There isn't a whole lot of money. A lot of people are like, why is there so much corruption? Because the police officers and I speak out of experience because some of my kids have been police officers and sheriffs, and they make $75 a week and have to put their own fuel in their vehicles. $75 a week, and everything's more expensive here. It makes no sense. So they're forced to be corrupt because of the abject poverty. And so I got long-winded, but I think I wrapped it up pretty much where we are, what we're doing. So
It's great.
We have a big children's home here and a children's home in South Mexico, in Chiapas, where we rescue internationally from all different countries. We work with embassies, we work with international immigration, and we find and replace the children with their stable families there. It's been, I could tell you story after story about that, but how we've had Marines and National Guard come into our home there, and it makes me cry actually, because it's so awesome when you see the restoration, when we find the child protection does all that work for us. They find the grandmother whose children were murdered, whose son and daughter went missing, what have you, and we find that lady up in the mountains of Guatemala or out in the mountains of Nicaragua or at the beach by Honduras or where have you, and we find them, and then we are able to get these little children who we rescued from brothels, from the worst of the worst. And 8 Marines will come in, or 8 National Guards will come in, machine guns, and take her from us. And then they send us pictures. They fly her across the border and get her home to their grandmothers, or their aunts, or uncles, or what have you. And the children are restored. So it's really, I didn't mean to get choked up.
No, I'm sure it's hard for you to see them go too, just because you felt like you had them protected with you. You know?
That's probably a lot of people. I have that in one of my posts one day. People are like, how can you, it must be so hard to raise so many kids. I'm like, raising them is not the hard part, letting them go. But we are totally 100% believe in reintegration, foster care, and adoption. We do. So a lot of people are like, how have you raised 2,000? Well, 2,000 have passed through my door. I've raised about 1,000, but at least half of them we are so blessed that we've reintegrated them. And when reintegration is not a possibility, we find foster care. We have our own foster care system in our ministry. We have 3 psychiatrists and about 4 attorneys, and one was a district attorney for child protection at one time. So we have them working the cases 24/7. And
I remember when I was there, some of the attorneys were there, and I thought I was so impressed by that, because I'm like, they're actually there working with you guys, serving, picking up
kids
stuff,
feel
cleaning,
family.
all the things. It's not like they're just a distant attorney from somewhere. I was
They
just really
were-
impressed by that.
The
Yeah.
kids don't call them attorneys or Mr. and Mrs. They call them auntie and uncle.
Yeah,
So,
that was sweet.
So that's what our biggest thing is right now, is we're trying to change. The Constitution of Mexico is a good constitution. The second rights for a child here, no, actually number one, and is the right for a child to have a family, have a mother and a father, have a home. So the Constitution is everything we want it to be. But unfortunately, bureaucracy is horrible. Red tape is miles thick. So we're trying to work around that legally. We've already done it in several states, and we are establishing our own foster care system. These are families who have been processed psychologically, mentally, financially, emotionally. They go through the process. Our process is minimum 6 to 9 months. Then we start the integration. We don't find children for families. We don't allow, to say, we don't allow people to come, oh, I want that little kid. Just the other day, I had a picture of one of our girls. She's a year. And someone wrote me a big shot on Facebook, and I didn't know her. She found me on Facebook. Hey, I saw this picture, and we have a lot of money. We want to adopt that little girl. And I said, I'm sorry, she's not for adoption. And I blocked her, because that's not right. That's not humane. We don't find children for families. We're not here to fulfill your dreams. We're here for you to fulfill that little girl's dreams. You're here to fulfill that little boy's dreams. So we don't find children for families. We find families for children. So I have a psychiatrist that analyzes the families, works with them, and I have a couple, actually, a married couple that are here 4 days a week, and they do therapy and process and for the children. And then our psychiatrists and attorneys get together, and they decide who's best for the other. Does that make sense? Because sometimes we have couples like, I want just 2 little girls, or I want a little boy. And once they do all their psychiatric and psychological tests, she's not prepared for a little girl. She needs a boy, or vice versa. Does that make sense? So we do everything very, very thorough. So, and that's actually, I love raising all these kids. I've got 45 kids right there. As soon as I walk out the door, they're all going to tell me a million things, and how school was, and this and that, and ask me what I was doing. That's good, but I'm deceiving myself only if I think I'm doing a good job of raising all these children by myself. It's not God's plan for man. It's best to have a family. So I feel very successful when I have a family. Like, so we're working with bureaucracy more. Like right now, next week, we're going to, for the first time, we're transferring, my attorneys are transferring 5 of my children whose cases are closed. The pedophiles have been sentenced anywhere from 40 to 123 years.
That's awesome.
So we got them all sentenced, and 5 of my children that were rescued in Chiapas from several different areas. My district attorney is there with another district attorney getting all the paperwork done right now. We're transferring them all from Chiapas to here, where we have families that are going to,
That's exciting.
To be able to take them soon. So finding a forever home for these children, excuse me, my elephant's about to fall off. Finding a forever home for these children is the biggest success story that I can share.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
That's amazing. Just all of it is definitely a book. I can see why you're writing a book. There's so much. You can just see God's hand weaved in every bit of it. And I'm sure it just took everything of surrender and faith and trust on y'all's part to get to where you are, Yeah. It's quite a story.
Yeah.
No
Thank
regrets.
you, Nicole.
You're welcome.
This is my first time talking to you, but I mean, Heather told me all about you and all about the work that you guys are doing. So this has been amazing for me to hear. And we just thank you so much for coming on here. And I know that your story is going to encourage even our listeners. It's encouraged me because I know that you have come up to a lot of obstacles to get to where you are right now, but you are faithful and you saw God come through for you over and over and over
He has
again.
been
And you
so
have been able
faithful over
to,
and over.
yeah,
Yes.
and you have changed so many people's lives. So I love that your story too is one of how just by you saying yes to God, how that has impacted thousands of children's lives and
Yeah.
many more people's lives that you that are being a part of your ministry and all of that. So thank you for saying yes to Jesus, and thank you for coming on our podcast and sharing your story. And guys, if you want to hear more or learn more about the Village Global and what they do and partner with them, maybe we're going to put the link in the description so that you can look more into it. And so we just thank you guys so much for listening today. Thank you for tuning in, and we hope that you will share this amazing episode with your friends, and make sure to like this video and subscribe to us, and we will see you next time.
So these are children that have been rescued from trafficking. We rescued his mom. She was 15. We rescued her. She'd been trafficked and sold since she was little. All these children have been rescued, some from different states of Mexico. And if it wasn't for our supporters, they would be in the worst case scenarios. But because of you guys, we got this one out of he was actually in a trash pit. A lot of people think it's only girls. It's not. It's a lot of girls, a lot of boys too. And the number is actually rising in the past few years of boys. It used to be like 1 in 8 were boys. Now it's about 4 in every 10 that are rescued are boys from brothels and sex trafficking. And because of you guys and because of everyone who supports us financially and prayerfully every month, we're able to continue rescuing, continue raising, continue restoring, and giving these children a brighter future. So aren't they beautiful?